Back at y'all with another one. So today what we're gonna do is we're gonna hand pollinate some of our cream corn. There's many ways to hand pollinate your corn, but this is just what I had on hand today. So what I'm gonna use is a piece of paper to catch the pollen and some Q-tips to pollinate the corn. Optimally, I'd like to use some paintbrushes, but I didn't have none, so Q-tips is what we're using today. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna give the corn a good shake. I'm gonna catch some pollen, a whole lot of little seeds on the paper. And we already got a whole lot of pollen that fell on the leaves, so I'm gonna scrape some pollen off of there. This is pretty fresh pollen. It's only been on there for a couple days. These all fell from here, so there ain't too much pollen in here no more. So I'm just gonna scrape this pollen off with this Q-tip. I got multiple Q-tips, so make sure that if you're using Q-tips or if you're using a paintbrush, make sure you switch it out. Just keep things clean. And like I said, this is my way of doing it. I'm not a professional, but I have hand pollinated different things from cucumbers to pumpkins to zucchini, tomatoes. So this method works good for me. And with pollen, make sure there's no water nearby or no water on your Q-tip or your paintbrush, whatever you're using, because water will automatically kill the pollen and it won't work. So one thing, just make sure everything is dry. All your materials are dry, from whatever you're using, the paper, a plate, to the paintbrush, to whatever. Just make sure everything is dry, because pollen and water do not mix. All right, so we got our pollen. Just a little bit, because as y'all can see, this ain't the biggest corn patch in the world. That's why I'm hand pollinating it, because there's only a couple. So what we're gonna pollinate is, I believe these are called trestles. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And what you wanna do is you wanna pollinate these within the first 2 weeks that these hairs start popping out. Because after the first 2 weeks, they won't be no good to pollinate. This shoot popped out about 6 days ago. So we're in the window to be able to properly pollinate. And right now, this is the only shoot that I have popping up in this small ass little patch. So this little amount of pollen should be able to do. All right, so one thing to remember about these hairs is each individual hair is a grain of corn on the cob. So what you want to make sure is you want to properly pollinate each individual hair, so you can get a solid cob of corn. Because sometimes if you don't get a proper pollination, you'll have little patches in your corn and it won't develop a full cob. So I just make sure I fully saturate all the hairs with pollen, so that way it properly gets pollinated around. Boom. Make sure there's a little dust on every hair. And of course, make sure it gets in here, like where the opening is, where all the hairs start coming out, because that's where all the new growth is coming out. So you want to make sure all that new growth is hitting that pollen. And you want to make sure that pollen gets all the way down that chute, so that way it'll properly get pollinated. But like I said, there's 1,000 ways to do this. So that's just my way of doing it. This is the only shoot that's popping up, as y'all can see. Everything else is still growing. It's the world's smallest batch, so it ain't like we're doing nothing crazy. So what I ended up doing was I just poured the rest of the pollen onto these hairs. And as you should be able to see, there's a good amount of pollen on each one of them hairs. There's a good amount of pollen on the main shoot, and there's pollen on all the individual hairs that are coming out. And what's gonna happen is that pollen is gonna go down into the shoot and it's gonna pollinate each one of the corn kernels and it's gonna make you a full shoot. So, like I said, this is just one that I have in here. So that's why I was able to pollinate it like that. But this is just a good method if you have a real small batch of corn and you want to hand pollinate it and you want to try to make sure that each individual corn cob gets properly pollinated. This is a good way of doing it, hand pollination. Also, like I mentioned, if you have a little bigger stock or if you just don't want to hand pollinate it, you can also shake the top of the, I believe these are trellises or flowers. Please correct me in the comment section because I am new to growing corn. I don't know each individual part of the corn plant, but the pollen comes from there, so you can shake it and you can have it trickle down into the hairs, or you can do what I did and you can hand pollinate it. Like I said, it'll probably work better with the paintbrush, but it also works with the Q-tip. But what I did was I just dumped the rest of the pollen on top, and that's how I was able to kind of drench the hairs a little better. Yep. All right, I'll get back at y'all with an update soon.